Chapter 1. The Great Schism. In the year 2050, the once united nation of Amera had fractured along ideological fault lines, giving birth to a new era of political polarization. The remnants of the once thriving democracy now stood divided between the Crimson Union and the Azure Alliance, two monolithic entities locked in perpetual conflict. The Crimson Union, draped in the colors of conservatism and tradition, championed strict adherence to age-old values and economic principles. Its supporters, predominantly rural and conservative, viewed themselves as guardians of tradition and defenders of the status quo. On the opposite end of the spectrum, the Azure Alliance embraced progressivism and social change, advocating for equality, diversity, and environmental stewardship. Its base, comprised mainly of urbanites and progressives, saw themselves as the vanguard of a new era of social justice and reform. The schism between the two factions ran deep, permeating every aspect of society. Families were torn apart, friendships fractured, and communities splintered as people aligned themselves with one camp or the other. Political discourse had degenerated into a toxic blend of vitriol and mistrust, with each side demonizing the other as enemies of the state. Elections had become battlegrounds, with both sides waging fierce campaigns to secure power and influence. The media, once a beacon of truth and accountability, had been co-opted by partisan interests, serving as propaganda machines for their respective factions. Meanwhile, the needs of the people were relegated to the sidelines as the Crimson Union and the Azure Alliance engaged in a relentless power struggle. Infrastructure crumbled, social services faltered, and the gap between the haves and the have-nots widened as the elite of both factions grew richer and more powerful. As the divide deepened and tensions escalated, the future of Amera hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of collapse. And amidst the chaos and uncertainty, whispers of dissent began to stir, heralding the dawn of a new chapter in the nation's turbulent history. Chapter 2. The Resurgence. Amidst the turmoil gripping Amera, a flicker of hope emerged from the shadows of despair. A grassroots movement, known simply as the Renewal Initiative, began to gain traction among the disillusioned masses. Led by a diverse coalition of activists, community leaders, and ordinary citizens fed up with the status quo, the Renewal Initiative offered a beacon of unity in a sea of division. Their message was simple yet powerful. It was time to transcend the partisan bickering and work together towards a brighter future for all. Across the nation, people from all walks of life rallied behind the call for change. From bustling metropolises to sleepy rural towns, the spirit of renewal spread like wildfire, igniting a spark of hope in the hearts of millions. But the entrenched powers that be were not about to relinquish their stranglehold on power without a fight. The Crimson Union and the Azure Alliance, threatened by the growing momentum of the Renewal Initiative, launched a coordinated campaign to crush the burgeoning movement before it could gain any real traction. Protesters were met with brute force, dissenting voices silenced, and the media inundated with propaganda aimed at discrediting the Renewal Initiative and its supporters. Yet despite the onslaught of opposition, the spirit of unity and resilience burned bright in the hearts of those who dared to dream of a better tomorrow. Undeterred by the obstacles in their path, the Renewal Initiative pressed on, organizing peaceful protests, community outreach programs, and grassroots organizing efforts aimed at building bridges across the gaping chasm of political division. They knew that the road ahead would be long and arduous, but they were determined to persevere, fueled by the belief that together, they could overcome even the greatest of obstacles. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the momentum of the Renewal Initiative continued to grow, gathering strength and momentum with each passing day. And though the road ahead was fraught with uncertainty and peril, the fires of hope burned bright in the hearts of those who dared to dream of a brighter future for Amera. Chapter 3. The Betrayal. As the Renewal Initiative continued to gain momentum, the leaders of the Crimson Union and the Azure Alliance grew increasingly desperate to maintain their grip on power. Realizing that their age-old tactics of division and polarization were no longer sufficient to quell the rising tide of change, they devised a sinister plan to crush the burgeoning movement once and for all. In a calculated display of political theater, the leaders of both parties publicly declared that the Renewal Initiative posed a grave threat to the stability and security of Amera. They painted the movement as a radical faction bent on undermining the very foundations of the state, using fear-mongering tactics to sow doubt and suspicion among the populace. With the full force of their propaganda machine behind them, the Crimson Union and the Azure Alliance launched a coordinated smear campaign aimed at discrediting the leaders of the Renewal Initiative. False accusations of treason and sedition were leveled against them, painting them as enemies of the state intent on plunging Amera into chaos and anarchy. In a shocking turn of events, the government swiftly moved to declare the Renewal Initiative a terrorist organization, authorizing the use of military force to suppress any dissenting voices. Armed soldiers patrolled the streets, rounding up suspected members of the movement and subjecting them to harsh interrogation tactics in the name of national security. Caught in the crossfire of political machinations, the people of Amera watched in horror as their hopes for change were mercilessly crushed beneath the boot heel of tyranny. Disillusioned and despairing, many began to lose faith in the possibility of a better tomorrow, resigning themselves to the grim reality of life under the oppressive rule of the two-party regime. Faced with the stark choice between submission and resistance, some brave souls dared to defy the unjust laws imposed upon them, risking life and limb in the pursuit of freedom and justice. But for the majority, the burden of oppression proved too heavy to bear, driving them to seek refuge in distant lands far from the suffocating grasp of tyranny. And so, as the sun set on the once great nation of Amera, the exodus of its disillusioned citizens marked the final chapter in a tragic tale of betrayal and oppression. Yet amidst the darkness, a flicker of hope remained, a beacon of light to guide the way for those who still dared to dream of a brighter future beyond the borders of tyranny. Chapter 4. The Awakening in the Depths of Despair. A glimmer of hope emerged from the shadows of oppression. Fueled by the indomitable spirit of resilience and fueled by the power of social media, the people of Amera began to rise against the injustices that had long plagued their nation. Amidst the darkness, a new generation of activists emerged, harnessing the power of technology to shine a spotlight on the political crimes committed by the ruling regime. Through viral videos, damning evidence of corruption and brutality spread like wildfire across the digital landscape, capturing the attention of the international community and galvanizing support for their cause. As the atrocities committed by the Crimson Union and the Azure Alliance were laid bare for the world to see, pressure mounted on the embattled government to be held accountable for their crimes against humanity. Global leaders condemned the flagrant violations of human rights, calling for immediate action to put an end to the reign of terror that had gripped the nation. Buoyed by the outpouring of solidarity from around the world, the people of Amera took to the streets in a groundswell of resistance, refusing to back down in the face of oppression. Armed with nothing but their voices and their convictions, they marched in defiance of tyranny, demanding justice and freedom for all who had suffered at the hands of their oppressors. With each step forward, the momentum of the movement grew, fueled by the collective outrage of a populace long denied their fundamental rights. From bustling city squares to remote rural villages, the cry for freedom echoed across the land, a clarion call to all who yearned for a better tomorrow. But the road to liberation would not be easy, for the ruling regime would stop at nothing to maintain their grip on power. As the protests escalated, so too did the violence, with armed forces deployed to quell the burgeoning uprising by any means necessary. Yet even in the face of such overwhelming force, the spirit of resistance burned bright in the hearts of the people, driving them ever onward in their quest for freedom. And as the world watched in awe, the people of Amera stood united, their voices ringing out as one in a chorus of defiance against the forces of tyranny and oppression.